Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 12th Annual Forum of the UNDP Business Call to Action being held at the sidelines of the 77th UN General Assembly. I'm Maria Ramos, and it's my pleasure and privilege to be the official Master of Ceremonies of the BCtA 12th Annual Forum. And we are delighted to have all of you with us here today for this two-day virtual event. And it's a special space connecting business leaders, policymakers, and development practitioners from all over the world. And we'll be discussing the role of the private sector in development cooperation, plus how innovative forms of collaboration between the public and private sector can actually drive sustainable development. Now, the private sector, we know, drives economic growth, and we know that when prosperity is equally distributed across society, economies grow faster. So this year's BCtA Forum focuses on that power of collaboration and shines a spotlight on the potential of innovative public-private partnerships. And now it gives me great pleasure to call on Luciana Trindade de Aguiar, the Program Manager of the UNDP Business Call to Action, to provide us with a warm welcome and to formally open the forum. So without further ado, welcome to you, Luciana.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for introducing me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our esteemed guests, panelists, donors, participants across the globe. Welcome to the Business Call to Action Annual Forum happening on the sidelines of the 77th UN General Assembly. Our forum this year is around the theme of collaboration. Collaboration is the starting point that leads to inclusive innovation, and together they are at the core of the response to these uncertain times. Many governments have welcomed innovative ways to address challenges posed by the current interlocked crisis to their societies. We have seen the setbacks faced by businesses in developing countries, with revenues falling 70% at the peak of the pandemic. We have seen climate change accelerating the knock-on effects on global supply chains, economies, and geopolitics. We also have seen the disruption posed by conflicts that resulted in soaring prices for food and energy, pushing an additional 100 million people into poverty so far. Never before there has been a greater need of a concerted and transformative alignment of multi-stakeholder collaboration to transform to provide rapid and inclusive development for those in need. At BCtA, we view this multi-layered crisis as a renewed and required call to action for businesses and investors to join forces with the public sector in driving more inclusive economic growth for leaving no one behind. Effective private sector engagement in development moves the way towards an inclusive, just, and sustainable economic growth through inclusive innovation, changes in public service delivery through transparent collaboration with small businesses, increased private sector accountability and integrity in managing impact on people and the planet. These are the pillars of an integrated solution that Business Call to Action is leading globally to show the power of collaboration in delivering essential services to underserved communities. In this annual forum, you hear our panelists' examples of how companies, foundations, investors, governments, bilateral and multilateral cooperation, as well as development banks and agencies in their unique capacities, can contribute to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. It's my pleasure to formally welcome you all to the 12th Business Call to Action Annual Forum. And finally, I'd like to thank our donor, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, which has been instrumental to the success of BCtA over the years. We are also grateful to the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany and the Asian Development Bank for collaborating with this initiative. Thank you for your participation. I hope we have an engaging and informative discussion on how to unlock the potential of collaboration. Thank you so much. Over to you, Maria.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luciana. Really great to hear those insightful welcome remarks. All right, now let me introduce to you our first guest keynote speaker for the day, Marcos Neto. Now, Marcos is currently the director of the UNDP Sustainable Finance Hub, and over the past 25 years, Marcos has led efforts for sustainable development, poverty eradication, and multi-stakeholder partnership building. And he is a passionate advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And he actually led the development of the UNDP's new private sector strategy and its offers on SDG finance, among many others. Marcos joined UNDP in February 2013 and has since led UNDP's global work on private sector development and foundations at UNDP's headquarters in New York. Ladies and gentlemen, I now give the floor to Marcos Neto.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much, Luciana. It's wonderful to see the continuous success of BCtA thanks to your leadership and the team. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in these days. I'm coming to you from New York, from the middle of the 77 UN General Assembly. And it's wonderful that you all made the time to join us in thinking about those collaborations. Now, as Luciana mentioned, the current context of multi-layer uncertainties, crisis rising from the pandemic, which is not yet over, wars, disputes, and a exacerbation of what is a long-term crisis is going to be with us, and we are already seeing very vividly of climate change, has posed many setbacks in sustainable development. The SDG finance gap has increased by 70% and is now standing at $4.2 trillion annually to stay on track for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which we have to be honest, we are not on track. These adverse circumstances have nonetheless led to possibilities to reimagine development and stimulate structural transformation to beget innovation, inclusive and digital solutions, where the private sector play a crucial role. It is important to note the design of transformational solutions is a multi-stakeholder process, involving not just the private sector, but also consumers, governments, and investors. No sector holds all the levers for creating public value. We need to set a new course for socially just, low carbon, and climate resilient world, where no one is left behind. This is why UNDP has launched a $1 trillion moonshot to promote the alignment of public and private sector resources with the SDG by 2025. This is a global call to action, and I'm repeating today, so you can all join us in whatever way you can. Private sector has a critical role in delivering the collective needs with the public sector. However, we are aware that sustainable development needs should be shaped into a financially sound and attractive business proposition, offering market return, risk return profiles, as well as growth prospect, but evermore focusing on generating a social and environmental impact, as well as a profitability. With the GISG Alliance, we have made more than 400 SDG-aligned investment opportunities in 19 countries available to investors. I also invite business to co-create signature solutions together, powered by innovation, digital tools, and the right types of finance. For example, we provide tailored business development and sustainable innovation programs through our SDG accelerators. At UNDP, we also work with public partners to help crowd in finance from the private sector, building partnerships, scaling innovative finance mechanisms, and to improve the effectiveness of financial resources. A very good example of facilitating public-private collaboration to advance solutions for sustainable development is exactly what our host for the next 2 days, the Business Call to Action's government-led program on inclusive innovation, implemented with the government of Colombia, eGov Lab, to increase access to telehealth to the rural poor, by training and structuring an ecosystem of local entrepreneurs that provided the government viable option to expand care capacity and implement self-diagnosis and virtual care tools that improve access to basic medical service. The program also strengthens the capacity of the national government to implement inclusive and sustainable public procurement and manage the impact. UNDP, through the Business Call to Action, develops strategic tools that governments can use to leverage the annual multi-trillion-dollar public procurement budgets to support sustainable development. Public procurement enables alignment, sustainable finance solutions by serving as a policy instrument that governments can use to propel changes in public service delivery, create fiscal space and jobs by partnering with the private sector to stimulate growth in industries that are often untouched. Nowadays, there is a new approach in public procurement through which governments meet their needs for goods and services. Inclusive public procurement, which engages governments, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and inclusive business to provide them with the service they need. IPPs designed to maximize equitable economic, social, and environmental benefits with the primary aim of promoting supplier diversity through including medium, small enterprises and inclusive business and other socially disadvantaged groups as active group and service providers within the supply chain. The potential of empowering both the public and private sectors through tools like inclusive innovation, inclusive public procurement, and including in impact measurement and management, among others, become a key prerequisite in making SDG finance more systemic and impact-centric. Business Call to Action is a pioneer in advocating impact measurement and management and leading the global efforts to streamline this practice in enterprise operating and emerging economies. The Sustainable Finance Hub that I'm the director of recognizes the importance of improving impact management for shifting the current systems of decision-making towards investing with positive impact on people and the planet. In addition, we deploy a multidimensional response to address the key business challenges and stimulate inclusive business transformation through initiatives like the Accelerator Labs, the Innovation Facility, and the Private Sector Global Facility. To conclude, let me reiterate that the private sector plays a critical role in delivering the collective needs with the public sector, especially in the context of developing countries, at a time that is characterized by multi-layers of challenges caused by the pandemic and other global geopolitical issues, and the ever-growing feeling on our daily lives of the climate crisis. The way to advance sustainable development forward is by forging collaboration aimed at public and private actors. It is never about the context between profit-driven and social good. UNDP is ready to help crowdfunding finance for the private sector, build partnership, scale up innovative finance mechanisms, and improving the effectiveness of financial resources. I invited all of you, both public and private sector actors, with us today and tomorrow to participate in this call, to work collaboratively, innovatively, and to realize that we owe to our lives today, to the future generations, to come together to solve the world's problems, which are, and the solution, the roadmap to solving those world problems are the Sustainable Development Goals. I wish you all a fantastic 2 days. I wish you, Luciana, and the team, a wonderful couple of days, and I look forward to hearing your deliberations, recommendations, and more important, you're coming together as partners, even though we are virtual. I think we've learned enough now how to make partnership work in this format. I turn back to my good friend Maria, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Marcos. Great keynote speech. All right, we now turn our attention to hear our second keynote speech, and this time from the head of Unit for Global Sustainable Economic Development at the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, Tru Skedvin. Now, throughout her 20 years of working with development cooperation, Tru has covered different aspects of inclusive economic development, from policy methods to implementation of programs. And in her previous role as chief economist at BCtA, Tru led a team on multi-dimensional poverty analysis, emphasizing the perspective of people living in poverty. Now, Tru has hosted Nobel laureate Professor Joseph Stiglitz and 12 world-leading economists at the conference that led to the creation of the Stockholm Statement, which sets out 8 principles for inclusive and sustainable economic development. Tru, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, Luciana, for inviting us and BCtA to this event. And thanks, Marcos, for very inspiring keynote speech. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everybody that are participating. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to participate at the inauguration of Business Call to Action's 12th annual forum. As we've already heard from the other introductions, and as we all know, we are living in very turbulent times. The impact of this economic instability, of climate change, of conflict, and of the pandemic are also mostly strongly felt by those who were already in a very vulnerable situation. For example, low-skilled workers in the informal markets, the small businesses that have very little capital savings, smallholder farmers, and so on. And within those groups, women and youth are particularly affected. So with this development, we need to pay particular attention to increasing inequality. And our joint efforts for inclusive development, including inclusive business strategies, are extremely important. And we know that during challenging times like these, the need for certainty in our commitments and strategies for inclusive and sustainable development become even more evident. And what we do know is that strength and collaboration between actors is particularly crucial. With this daunting developmental and environmental challenges that we are facing, of course, we all understand that no actor can carry the solutions needed on its own. Continuing to unlock the potential of partnership across public, private, civil society, and research fields is very urgent. We basically need all hands on deck, join forces in the same direction for sustainable and inclusive development. And we need to combine different actors' knowledge and competence for the best results. And we need to catalyze capital for inclusive development results. So this year's annual forum's theme, focusing on power of collaboration, is strategic and important and calls on all of us to act. Sweden's overall objective for development cooperation is poverty alleviation, and we keep our emphasis on leaving no one behind, with poor people's perspective and the rights perspective at the very core of all of our operations. We see that inclusive business has a vital role to play in developing local solutions that responds to the preconditions of vulnerable groups in specific contexts, groups that otherwise risk falling behind. Over the years, we are happy to have partnered with Business Call to Action in order to join forces in engaging public and private actors for systemic change, where businesses can grow within the planetary boundaries. Business Call to Action is also particularly serves as a platform for further accelerate action towards gender equality, which is extremely important in the developments that we see today, where women are even more affected negatively than men. And the Business Call to Action has provided guidance on how businesses can engage, as well as by demonstrating valuable examples of public-private partnership. As a result, we now see more and more examples of co-designed collaboration models where governments and local entrepreneurs and stakeholders come together to deliver essential services and goods to underserved communities. I want to highlight two such examples, which we are proud to have contributed to. And one of them is the identification of innovative telehealth solutions for prenatal, natal, and postnatal services, enhancing the situation for women living in rural and remote areas of Colombia. This was carried out with local partners as part of Business Call to Action's inclusive innovation journey. Another example is the SIDA-supported innovative agri-tech solutions with Business Call to Action, whereby climate tech solutions helped increase the sustainability of farming practices. So digital platforms made technology accessible for low-income farmers, and specific sensor mechanisms assisted in optimizing water consumption for the farmers. This is a very concrete example, and it decreased the environmental impact from the farming itself, whilst supporting these smallholder farmers' livelihood. These are just a few of very many promising programs that offers us an opportunity to learn and to ensure that we unlock the potential of innovative public-private collaboration for inclusive development. As always, at Business Call to Action events, it is extremely encouraging to see how businesses, governments, and civil society come together with a commitment to collaborate and take action. And with that, I would like to thank you again for this opportunity. And we look forward to learning from each other in fruitful discussions that can help us to catalyze the transformation needed for an inclusive development that is sustainable in all its 3 dimensions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, True. Fantastic to hear your keynote speech. All right, and I would actually like to thank all our opening speakers, Luciana, Marcos, and True, for joining me in kicking off the first day of BCTA's 12th annual forum. And now, as we begin our programming for the day, please feel free to tweet and share the event using the hashtag BCTA Forum and also BCTA Live. So I repeat, BCTA Forum and BCTA Live, those are our hashtags. And now let's get the day started with our very first session entitled Innovative Public-Private Collaborations for Sustainable Development, Replicating Inclusive Business to Government Models, tackling the first pillar of the integrated solution that BCtA offers. So now I hand over the discussion to Juan David Martin Jimenez, who will be moderating this session. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Maria, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to our esteemed panelists and an audience from around the world. My name is Juan David Martin, and I'm the leader and head of experimentation at UNDP Accelerator Lab Colombia. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this session that convenes key representatives from the public-private innovation ecosystem to discuss the potential of innovative public-private collaborations through inclusive business to government, B2G models in the delivery of essential services to the last mile. Talking about innovation could be a challenge. We talk about the semantics for hours. Today, we're not going to stop on that. We're going to see cases where innovation is built from shared visions on development. Inclusive innovation and collaboration are the core of building back better. Let's see at what example of recent times. The scope and urgency of the impacts of COVID-19, coupled with the effects of climate change, have provided ideal conditions for governments to claim leadership and innovation and direct it toward the challenges faced by the societies. However, government must step in to support expertise and existing best practices to drive inclusive innovation that expands and sustains the delivery of essential services while addressing pre-existing and emerging development gaps. The private sector has already devised inclusive solutions for a multitude of problems faced by governments and societies. Business that serve the government, B2G, operate on proven models designed to serve low-income populations across multiple geographies, including through tech-enabled solutions that, 1, deliver cost-effective healthcare services, ensure crop productivity and smallholder farmers' income, or 3, provide livelihood skills development through e-learning or access to affordable internet services. B2G models act as a key mechanism to mitigate the risk inherent to innovation that governments might face when creating innovative solutions for underserved communities. In 2021, UNDP Colombia, the Accelerator Lab, and Business Call to Action joined forces with a Colombia government agency, Impulsa Mi Lab, to pilot the Inclusive Innovation Journey Program, Más Vida, Accelerating Telehealth in Colombia. This was a government-centered inclusive innovation process focused on connecting health public actors and local telehealth solutions for prenatal, natal, and postnatal services to the development of inclusive business government B2G telehealth solutions. The pilot aimed to advance local telehealth solutions for local prenatal, natal, and postnatal health challenges, promote more sustainable, effective, and inclusive public-private collaborations in the telehealth sector, and ensure affordable and equitable access to essential health services and products to low and middle income populations in Colombia. As a result, we connected over 280 public actors, 8 local telehealth solutions, and 12 local and global partners, including GovTech experts, telehealth mentors, and impact investors, which we are happy to have with us today. We are sharing on the chat the article for the BCtA Colombia case. The Inclusive Innovation Journey methodology aims to strengthen the capacity of local private sector and bridge the development gap faced by governments by using tech-enabled, market-based businesses models to advance inclusive solutions to a B2G model. What is unique about this newly launched program is how it builds partnerships to support innovation processes and encourage formal innovation systems to focus on the poor, help the low-income actors to adapt, diffuse and use innovations, and work to address structural roadblocks. In the end, this innovation process sought to support the co-evolution of market and government to sustain a resilient, inclusive innovation ecosystem. Building on this pilot, this session aims to showcase the potential of government-led inclusive innovation and B2G models in providing essential goods and services to the underserved communities. To this end, I am pleased by the company of key representatives from the public-private innovation ecosystem to discuss the potential of innovative public-private collaborations through inclusive business-to-government B2G models in the delivery of essential services to the last mile. I would like to invite each of them to introduce themselves and briefly share their work, how their work connects to inclusive business-to-government models in the delivery of essential services. I am pleased to welcome Milagros Rivas to this panel. Milagros is the Division Chief Advisory Services at the IDB Invest, which she joined in 2021. She is responsible for leading the climate change, gender and inclusion, SME development, digitalization, and public-private partnership areas. Milagros, thank you for joining us today. We would like to briefly share with us your work and how it connects to inclusive business-to-government models or the private innovation ecosystem in the delivery of essential service to the last mile.
Thank you very much, Juan David, and thank you very much to UNDP for the invitation. I am honored to participate in this important discussion. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our audience as well. IDB Invest is the private arm of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. We invest in the financial sector, corporates in the agribusiness, manufacturing, telecom, and tourism sectors, as well as in infrastructure. In addition, IDB Invest provides advisory services, which are the non-financial additionality that we bring to the table in order to maximize the impact of our investments. Through advisory services, we support private-public collaboration models that are inclusive and sustainable. In many of our operations, we see the value of public-private collaboration models to mobilize investment at large scale, and most important, bring intentionality to inclusion, raise the bar in sustainable and ESG standards, and aim for a more systemic solutions. One of the most efficient ways to catalyze impact-driven public-private collaboration is through PPPs, that stands for public-private partnerships. I will have the opportunity to go deeper in this successful model along this discussion.
Thank you, Milagros. I am pleased to welcome also Jose Lozano to this panel. Jose is the director of Alpha Mundi's Latin American office. Jose, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to briefly share with us your work and how it connects to inclusive business to government models or the public-private innovation ecosystem in the delivery of essential services to the last mile?
Thanks, Juan David. I'm happy to be here and joining everyone in this talk. I am Jose Lozano, the investment director of Alpha Mundi. We at Alpha Mundi are, as many people will have already listened to this term, an impact investor. We basically manage capitals from the private sector and take this capital and give funding to companies that in many ways are trying to help the most needed people in the region, not only Colombia, but also in other countries in Latin America and also in Africa. This is quite important because we try to bring the private capital to generate positive social and environmental impact, and in many cases, join forces with governments to help these companies be suitable for us to invest in the money and also to produce the social impact needed in the region. Thanks, Juan David.
Thank you, Jose. And now I'm pleased to welcome David Uribe to this panel. David is the Chief Technology Officer at Oracle, Colombia, and Ecuador. David, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to briefly share with us your work and how it connects to inclusive business-to-government models or the public-private innovation ecosystem in the delivery of essential services to the last mile?
Thank you, Juan. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Oracle, what I'm working on, has many lines of business, and sometimes they compete without providing the best solution for our customers sometimes. So my job is to give a single integrated view of a solution to our clients by coordinating this line of business. In Oracle, we work a lot with public sector, and we are consumers of those B2G models. So we'll talk a little bit about our experiences around this and the collaboration between government and technology companies like Oracle. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I'm now pleased to welcome Lucy June to this panel. Lucy is the co-founder and CEO at Medico. Lucy joins Salud Tools to bring a fresh point of view and founded the solutions to Medico to tackle the inequality at the healthcare system in Colombia and to provide a great medical consultation experience to all people deserve. Lucy, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to briefly share with us your work and how it connects to inclusive business to government models or the public-private innovation ecosystem in the delivery of essential services to the last mile?
Sure, Juan. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am very, very honored to be here. I'm Lucy. I'm managing the telemedicine service to Medico in Colombia, and our goal is to make the healthcare accessible and affordable for everyone in Latin America. We're currently focusing on the primary care through the telemedicine service so that all Colombians and also all Latin Americans can have an easy access and fast access to the healthcare system that they really need, regardless of who they are, regardless of how much they make or where they are. So in order to do this right now, we're selling our telemedicine service through the local pharmacies in Colombia with a very economical price so that anyone can buy the telemedicine service just as easy as buying a bottle of water. We participated into the pilot program that Juan mentioned, the Inclusive Innovation Journey by UNDP and Business Call to Action called Más Vida, Accelerating the Telehealth. It's early this year, and we learned so much about B2G model to expand our business into another level and also guarantee the access to more people and who are really need our service. So it was an amazing experience. We learned a lot, great discussion, great mentorship, great presentations, networking. So I'm happy to say that after that, we have been trying to achieve our first B2G alliance, and we just did our first step for our first B2G alliance. And thank you very much for all of you. And thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Lucy. And now I'm pleased to welcome Camila Coronado to this panel. Camila is a project management specialist for the governance at USAID, Colombia. In this role, Camila currently manages the responsive governance activity, an effort to enhance good governance, strengthen public management, and increase the capacities of public institutions to provide effective services delivery in 34 conflict-affected municipalities. Camilo, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to briefly share with us your work and how it connects to inclusive business to government models or the public-private innovation ecosystem in the delivery of essential services to the last mile?
Thank you, Juan David, for the introduction. And I would also like to thank Business Call to Action and UNDP for having me here. I'm honored be with all of you and with my fellow panelists. Well, to answer your question, I will start mentioning that USAID Colombia relies in its work on the 2020-2025 Country Development Cooperation Strategy. Its goal is to support Colombia's journey to self-reliance. And self-reliance in this context means that Colombia has capacity and commitment, and I would like to highlight those words, capacity and commitment, to plan, finance, and implement its own solutions to development challenges. To achieve this goal, and now I link our strategy with your question, We, as USAID, need to bring together the public and the private sector to the same table, acknowledging first that both parties are at the cornerstone for Colombia's sustainable development, and second, that both parties need each other to amplify its impacts in terms of improving the quality of life of the most needed in the country, and second, of creating a sustainable and more equitable economic welfare. Now, my role in USAID is being an actor that can translate complex technical language into a simpler one, promoting thus a clearer space for the public and the private sector to collaborate. Also worth mentioning that USAID, as a development agency, we work with institutions, so we firmly believe that Colombia has a strong institution we can rely on. And we do this by using innovative public mechanisms to generate evidence that, if it is effective, could close the gaps in service delivery to the most needed population. Thank you, Juan, over to you.
Thank you, Camilo. And with that, we finish the presentation of the panelists. And we can see that from investment, cooperation, guidance, support, we're able to create a strong environment to innovate in services with B2G models. Now we're going to go for specific questions. The first one is going to go to Milagros, which I remind you is the Chief of Advisory Services in the Inter-American Development Bank. Milagros, what is the role of impact-driven public-private collaboration models for sustainable development?
As mentioned before, one of the most efficient ways to catalyze impact-driven public-private collaboration is through PPPs. For those that are not familiar with these models, is a model where the government, through a very rigorous tendering processes, appoints a private company to provide a public service or build, operate, and maintain a public asset. We all know that successfully mobilizing public and private investment in infrastructure will have a high impact on the economic growth of developing countries. Let me share with you three impactful figures. First, an analysis done by IDB group specialists shows that countries in low-income regions with the right investment climates and the adequate incentives can see that growth rates could increase by 3.5 percentage points during a 10-year period. Secondly, every $1 billion invested in the development of infrastructure assets can create 35,000 jobs and formalize also the informal sectors. And third, every billion has the potential to increase the income of the average citizen in a range of 3 to 5%. All these data points demonstrate that this type of investment has an important effect on reducing poverty and inequality and creates the right conditions for SMEs to flourish and grow. But let me move to the next steps. PPPs are useful not only to attract financing and promote development, but also to crowd in innovations by leveraging the private sector's know-how and experience. These innovations can be implemented through the adoption of new technologies, through improved asset management techniques, or by achieving operational efficiencies. Finally, well-developed and planned PPPs can also bring other benefits for governments that are linked to sustainability, such as improved procurement processes, increased transparency, promotion of fair market conditions, and ability to provide SMEs access to markets and public procurement. All of them are vital factors to pave the way for private investments. In summary, there is a need to develop projects that are climate fit resilient and at the same time that deliver inclusive solutions for SMEs and for the citizens by improving connectivity, access to markets, access to new products and services, as well as creation of procurement and employment opportunities.
Thank you, Milagros. Would you like to add something more on how IDB is specifically investing in supporting local SMEs to effectively engage in public-private collaboration models?
Of course, overall, IDB Invest, through our investment and through our advisory work, supports the integration of SMEs in value chains, as well as its access to financial and non-financial services. Specifically, you will see this more in the context of investment in the telecom sector on infrastructure, where IDB Invest promotes economic prosperity and the improved well-being by catalyzing access to sustainable finance and bringing in innovative financial instruments. Those innovative instruments may be linked to the achievement of impact results. Let me share one example around this line. In the infrastructure sector, Puerto de Antioquia is a good example. In 2001, IDB Invest signed a loan for the construction, operation, and maintenance of Puerto de Antioquia through a PPP model, a new multipurpose facility located in the Gulf of Urabá in Colombia. Due to its geostrategic location, it will be the port terminal closest to the main production and consumption centers of the country, becoming a key infrastructure for strengthening Colombian foreign trade. Additionally, it will allow small and large farmers in Urabá to boost their competitiveness and expand their presence in international markets. The implementation of the port project will generate more than 17,000 new jobs in Urabá, especially for SMEs. The team established agreements with local communities aimed at generating social value for the port sustainability, committing to hire local SMEs and promote the integral development for local economies and communities. For example, around catering, facility management, providing simple construction work. IDB Invest has promoted the alignment of Puerto of Antioquia with the highest international standards in socio-environmental matters, which also means that the project responds to the need to implement sustainable, safer, and more efficient transport infrastructures, which contribute to improving sustainable development goals. Another example is Tigo Colombia. A guarantee line was extended to support Tigo Colombia, a subsidiary of Millicom in Colombia, to support Tigo Colombia in the spectrum purchase and network rollout, including rural connectivity investment, providing foster broadband and capacity, especially to SMEs in rural areas. Through this partnership among Tigo, the Ministry of the Information and Communication Technologies, the Single Fund for Information and Communication Technologies, local banks like Bancolombia and IDB Invest, we all put joint efforts to contribute to reduce the digital divide in Colombia. The aim was to improve digital infrastructure availability and quality connectivity to rural communities, where data services such as mobile banking, digital healthcare, and digital agricultural productivity for small rural businesses are center front. This connectivity has the power to enable MSMEs integration in the local and national markets, enhance small producers' productivity, and increase livelihoods, to name a few. As part of our advisory services, we are working with Tigo in order to support the activation of digital connectivity through concrete pilots that will intentionally enhance rural MSMEs productivity and contribute to their growth. Those are examples on how public-private collaboration enhance SME growth and how IDB Invest is taking a pioneering role to foster this type of innovative models.
And thank you for your examples. Now we're going to go with Jose Lozano, the director of Alphamundi Latin America. Jose, what are the key challenges you encounter when identifying and supporting SMEs to generate environmental and social impact on society?
Thank you, Madawi. And maybe I would start saying that the biggest challenge that we found every time we want to support companies is basically giving funding to the companies that have the highest risk, but produce a really big impact in society. Sometimes we do find impact initiatives in the region that have an amazing impact, but because of the risk level that these companies represent, they're not suitable for us. Some examples could be a small fintech that's going to support a specific industry in Colombia or in Mexico, an off-grid energy company in Colombia, or for example, a small fintech giving small loans to people that want to join the university for the first time. Given the risk of these companies, sometimes we're not able to give the funding needed, even though the company is really, really good and has an amazing impact and supports many people in the country.
Thank you, Jose. Now we go for our second question. What are the opportunities for more inclusive collaboration between governments and local entrepreneurs to effectively reach unserved populations?
Yeah, well, basically going back to what I was mentioning before. I was talking about the biggest challenge that we face. I think the biggest way or biggest opportunity of collaboration that we could find right now is to have governments helping us structure blended structures to reduce risk of this type of investments. Today, if you go to Colombia, for example, you can find some blended structures even in the local market that reduce risk of many companies. But given the needs that we find today in society, this is not enough. It would be amazing to have blended structures. And when I say blended structures, basically money that it's given by institutions to lower the risk of potential investments and help bring capital from private sector into these investments. This could be amazing to reduce risk of several sectors like clean water, for example, agriculture, or even renewable energy sectors that in many cases face different risk every day, execution risk. They face political risk, economic risk, even hedging risk, FX risk. So it would be really, really good if we can join forces with the public sector to bring some of these structures, of the blended structures. Some could be, for example, concessional capital, in which a public entity gives a loan as part of the investment and help us from the private sector, join forces and give the funding needed for this company to generate growth and at the same time generate the social impact that we are all looking for. Another example of blended finance that would be excellent for as a collaboration in the current situation could be a guarantee vehicle in which the public sector takes part of the losses so that the private sector is willing to put money into these high-risk companies in different sectors. So that's another example that could be really, really useful for us. And it's a clear example of collaboration between the public and private sector. And I think the last maybe blended structure that I could think about is basically a technical assistance. In many cases, companies need technical assistance to fulfill some of their goals, even starting from growth or even reporting all the key metrics that many lenders ask to the company in order to give the money needed for growth. So I think at the end, having this blended structure is a perfect example of collaboration that could help us go ahead and break the challenges that I was mentioning in the question before.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you for your examples. Now I'm going to go for David Uribe, Chief Technology Officer in Oracle, Colombia, and Ecuador. David, what is the role of a multinational technology company such as Oracle in fostering and supporting inclusive innovation between governments and local entrepreneurs?
Okay. Oracle is a company that offers technological solutions to its customers in terms of applications, development platforms, and computing infrastructure for both on-premise and in the cloud. The question is, how do you make it possible for everyone not only to access technology, but to have the possibility of becoming a provider of technological solutions? I believe that in order to achieve inclusive collaboration between government and entrepreneurs, 4 elements are broadly needed. The first one is a platform that connects entrepreneurs and state entities so they can sell and buy efficiently. The second one is internet access in the most remote places for inclusive coverage. Milagros was talking about it with Millicom and government collaboration. That's very important. The third one is inclusive access to technology. And the last one, knowledge of technology. In the first 2 elements, the platform and internet access, it is usually the state that is responsible for the solution in collaboration with other companies, as Milagros said. For example, in Colombia, we have the platform Colombia Compra Eficiente. I guess we all know it. This translates Colombia Efficient Purchase. This is a kind of marketplace where suppliers publish their products or services, and state entities order from there. In the same way, the Colombia government has made and will continue to make efforts to expand internet access in the most remote areas, as Milagros was talking about. And it is in the next two elements, access to technology and knowledge, where technology companies like Oracle must play a fundamental role. Oracle, for example, has a tier of cloud services that are always free, and other services then can be accessed for a limited time for free. With these, entrepreneurs from less favored areas access technologies without having to invest from the beginning. But on the contrary, this free technology leverages the operation and growth of their business. But inclusive access to technology is not enough if you don't know how to use it. And here comes the fourth element, knowledge of technology. So Oracle in Latin America has developed a program called Oracle Next Education, that offers education at no cost to develop technical and non-technical skills in programming and entrepreneurship for those people who cannot access formal education. To date in Colombia, we have more than 2,000 registered students and more than 400 certified people. And additionally, we have alliances with companies interested in hiring these people in case they don't wish to be entrepreneurs.
Thank you, David. A second question, from your experience, what is the potential of business to government models in delivering essential services to the last mile?
Yeah, once you have this public procurement platform, the B2G model begins to cover these essential services. For example, in Colombia, I know about that the Colombia Compra Eficiente platform has a humanitarian aid catalog where each local government can acquire supplies to mitigate crises such as the pandemic. Which is in 2021 helped more than 600 local councils in Colombia. So with this platform, we can offer this kind of essential service to the last mile.
David. And now we're going to go with Lucy June, the co-founder and CEO of Medico. Lucy, you participated in one of the first pilots of the Inclusive Innovation Journey. Why did Salud Tools decided this was the time to develop a business to government model?
Sure, so I'll give you a straight answer. We have been always interested in B2G model because we would love to reach out to more our target patients all over in Colombia. And B2G model can guarantee it. So to Medico, we have well-established business model in B2C and B2B, and we have a proven record in doing two lines of business very successfully. But in terms of B2G, we had just one pilot project with Defensa Civil Colombiana, which is civil protection against natural disasters. Right before the pandemic in San Andres, which is a beautiful island in Colombia where the ocean is Turkish blue and green. So I'm definitely recommending all of you to visit there. So beautiful. But unfortunately, before the pandemic, the huge hurricane attacked this area. So these hurricane basically destroyed everything, even hospitals and clinics. So with a special alliance with the Wi-Fi company and Defensa Civil, the government organization and us, to Medico, we provided the telemedicine service to the hurricane victims in the area. Based on this experience, we have learned that it is the model that which would take us to our people group who are in a really vulnerable situation or absolute need of medical consultations, which is our target group as well. So during the pandemic, of course, we could attend a lot of patients through B2B and B2C. It has been very successful, but we have been questioning ourselves a lot that do we cover all patients that need our telemedicine service? So we have been trying to execute the B2G model, but we just didn't know where and how to start. And therefore, the pilot program of Inclusive Innovation Journey by UNDP and Business Call to Action was a perfect program for us to learn about the B2G model.
Thank you, Lucy. And what are some of the benefits of developing business to government models that are centered on the needs of underserved communities in the last mile?
Great question. And okay, let's say telemedicine is not a new thing, right? I'm pretty sure all of you here have heard about it before and probably have used it a lot of times, and it's nothing new, you know? But in LATAM, telemedicine has done a very poor job because it's mainly accessible to those who have premium insurance or bank accounts or credit cards. The rest, 47% of LATAM population, around 330 million people who basically make money every day to survive every day, they're left out of this service. These people cannot use telemedicine service because it's not there for them. So they actually, to take care of their health or the family's health, they have to travel to the hospital or clinic to give up a daily income without knowing that they could actually solve the problem. You know, it's a big deal. So to serve these underserved communities through only B2G and B2G, B2B and B2C, of course, we could help people in need, but there are limitations that I just mentioned. But through the B2G model, we could leverage the penetration rate to these communities into another level. And additionally, we can provide the service more economically to our patients. Of course, we're talking about sustainability. So we have three, right? Powerful, reach, wide coverage, and better price and sustainability. Golden, right? So to achieve this through the program that I just mentioned, Inclusive Innovation Journey by UNDP and Business Call to Action, we have discussed various things about the B2G model, starting with the discussion how the government organizations would think of us or how they perceive us, telehealth startups. How can we take advantage of it? How can we take it around? And we had a mentor who could actually analyze our business with a very, very objective perspective, and also give us some lights about what kind of opportunities that we have and how to design a B2G model, how to implement it, how to measure the impact. So important, right? It's to measure the impact of our business and use it more effectively to convince the government officials. And also we have listened to various presentations who have achieved the alliances with the government. So it was a great, amazing program, thanks to UNDP Colombia and Business Call to Action again. So after that, we have been trying to improve our strategy to B2G model, and we have been networking continuously, just like we have learned from the program. And yeah, we're very excited about it. The first step that to reach more people with better sustainability and better price to underserved community through B2G model.
Thank you, Lucy. And it was also a pleasure for us to know you and work with you in the program. Before moving to our last panelist, I would like to motivate the audience, if they have some questions, to please post them so we can discuss them after we talk to Camilo. And now we go to Camila Coronado, Project Management Specialist, Governance in USAID Colombia. Camilo, you said that USAID Colombia is making great efforts to leverage on existing public initiatives to facilitate the access of private companies interested in investing in projects that not only have benefits from them in the short term, but also have the potential to benefit the most needed. Could you please expand on this? What does USAID Colombia expect to get?
Thank you, Juan David, for the opportunity to share what we are doing here at USAID Colombia's office. I would like to mention that a couple of examples of innovative mechanisms we are currently working on, but public, but each one at different stage of implementation. The first one is called Works for Taxes. This mechanism was originally developed in Peru. However, it has been tailored to Colombia's own specificities. Works for Taxes was created to bring closer the private sector as a key player for sustainable peace, targeting private resources and funds, taxes that companies have to pay, and direct those funds to those regions affected the most by the armed conflict in the country. And of course, regions that are affected by high levels of poverty as well. By its very nature, we saw a lot of potential of this mechanism because it has kind of three intentions to achieve, like 3 wins. The first one is for the private sector by reducing the tax payment cycle, which means that the private sector could benefit from having timely access to public services like roads, infrastructures, hospitals, schools. The second win is for the government by the better use of tax funds, which means that the government can leverage on the efficiencies of the private sector in order to achieve public value. And the third one is for the communities themselves, that they are going to receive and benefit from timely service delivery. And the second mechanism is the development of a standard project for telemedicine and telehealth. And it is in some way related on the work that Lucy just mentioned. We have been working with 2 institutions, the National Planning Department and the Ministry of Health. We are at the final stage of kind of these clearances, public procedures. And once we can release the standard project, all the municipalities across the country will be able to use this mechanism to address health issues. Some benefits of the standard project are the reduction up to 70% of pre-investment costs, which could be a really relief for those municipalities that have not enough funds to invest on structuring a project, and up to 4 months in project design and structuring as well. With implementation of this mechanism, we also are aiming to achieve 3 wins. The first win is for local governments by better using limited resources like funds, the staff, technical capacities. The second win is for the private sector, like health providers, startups, joint ventures, like those that Lucy just mentioned. They could benefit from having a new and unexplored business opportunity provided by the public sector. And the third win is, of course, for local and rural population that will benefit from timely access to health services. But now I would like to share, like, how do we move on from thinking and planning to practice? And I would like to focus on the mechanism of Works for Taxes. Works for Taxes was first used in 2018 after some institutional and regulation arrangements were made. The fiscal ceiling, that is the overall amount that the government of Colombia allows to be used in this mechanism, is near like $60 million per year at a current exchange rate. From 2018 on, the number of companies using this mechanism has kept increasing, going from 28 in 2018 to 94 in 2021. But how we as USAID we engaged with this mechanism? First, we engaged with the public sector at the subnational level, like working directly with the municipalities, with governors' offices affected by armed conflict and poverty, and provided tailored technical assistance in the design and structuring of projects in health, education, and infrastructure sectors. And I would also like to highlight that we are intentionally working on these sectors. The most of the needs of unserved populations are related to this. And with the private sector, we use like a pedagogical strategy to promote the participation in implementing key development projects in needed geographies with challenging conditions. Our intention with the deployment of this strategy is that companies are interested in investing, considering a medium long-term perspective and not a short-term economic one. From time to time, we revise our strategies of engagements with both parties, considering first the ever-changing conditions in the regions where USAID operates, and second, the adjustments of regulations issued by the government of Colombia. But this is kind of how we operate, but I would like to share with all of you an example that we are working right now. And this example is being implemented, or this project is being implemented in the municipality of Sardinata. Key elements to highlight. First, Sardinata is located in one of the most violent regions in the country. Second, Sardinata receives constant migrant population from Venezuela. And third, it lacks proper infrastructure. 90% of municipal roads are either regular or in bad condition. For all the audience, Sardinata is a municipality located near the frontier with Venezuela, with a population of 20,000 people, 60% living in rural areas where not only the municipal administration, but also the government of Colombia face challenges in delivering timely public services. Considering that Sardinata is a municipality prioritized by USAID interventions, we decided to work with the local administration, assisting in the design and structuring of a project to improve near 1 kilometer of tertiary roads in rural areas to stimulate more regional equity, security, connectivity, and productivity. The interesting thing in this project is that in parallel, we work with Medical Duarte. Medical Duarte is a company that provides health services, and they were kind of interested in investing and working in this road infrastructure project because they see how they can give something back to the communities. And of course, they are thinking in a long-term perspective, because if the roads are improved, of course, people from rural areas are able to have access to health services. We are providing technical assistance to Medical Duarte in topics related to regulations, the understanding and use of the financial mechanisms establishing works for taxes, and sharing good practices generated by USAID from our own experiences in infrastructure projects on tertiary roads. One positive effect of this relationship is that Medical Duarte has created their own technical unit for designing and structuring projects, and they plan to expand the technical assistance to other municipalities, realizing that they can add more value and give something back to the most needed communities across the country.
Thank you, Camilo, for your answer and for your examples. And now, if we're thinking about the future, what challenges do you envision the public-private partnership for sustainable development in Colombia will face in a context of huge expectations and at the same time uncertainty?
Okay, thank you. As you probably know, Colombia is entering into a phase with a new elected government. It has been like 1 month and a half that a new government was elected, and they have kind of been sending messages of their priorities in terms of guaranteeing the provision of public services to the most needed, not only in conflict-affected regions, but across the country. In USAID, we agree with that, the importance for the provision of timely public services, but also we acknowledge the importance of the private sector as a key player that supports the government of Colombia, like setting in motion all the machinery needed to advance with these priorities. And also we acknowledge the need for the private sector to have the right incentives to keep on investing in these innovative mechanisms, approaches like courts for taxes, the stand-up projects, and many other initiatives that were not mentioned here. And those initiatives, of course, are clearly linked with having clear rules and responsibility to all actors. But also there are other structural challenges, for example, security issues in the country that limit the possibilities for the private sector to deploy safety, their interventions, or the push between licit versus illicit economies in the regions for labor, mostly from rural populations. And most of the time, this population need kind of to trade off between both options. And finally, there are challenges that can be considered more like a technical or regulation challenges, like the never-ending process and countless requirements, revisions and clearances that companies have to face when dealing with initiatives such as court for taxes, or difficult relationships with some municipal offices that either technically or politically do not consider innovative public-private mechanism useful for their territories. And on these challenges, we as USAID have the experience and willingness to step in, first supporting public institutions in streamlining processes for public policies being more effective. And of course, we can leverage on our goodwill and reputation in the region where USAID has had presence for many years. I finished by emphasizing that here in USAID Colombia, we leverage on existing innovative mechanism that work while the effort of trying. You know, like sometimes these mechanisms are hard to try. It takes time and effort for them to be effective. They must be proven. They may fail. They must be adjusted, but it worthwhile the trying of these mechanisms to work. Back to you, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilo, and thanks for those wonderful insights. Before we move to a couple of questions that we already have in the chat, I would like to thank again to all our panelists, in some cases partners, and in all collaborators. Sustainable development needs not only innovative solutions, we need innovative alliances and collaborations to solve current challenges and reach the goals we have faced as humanity. I'm gonna read the first question that we have, and maybe I'm gonna direct it to Jose. If anyone else wants to talk about it, please raise the hand so we can know you're gonna talk. So this is a question from Dose Susunga. I hope I said that name well. Without institutional reforms at national, subnational, and local level, do businesses alone are enough for us to achieve the SDGs? I'm gonna maybe repeat it. Without institutional reforms at national, subnational, and local level, do businesses alone are enough for us to achieve the SDGs? Jose.
Yeah, well, I think at the end, businesses alone are not enough to achieve the SDGs. In my opinion, we need the participation of many actors, not only businesses, but private sector that can give the funding needed by these businesses, institutions like the IDB or USA that can provide, for example, technical assistance, grants, additional help that the business may need in regards to knowledge, or even additional funding. So for SDGs to be achieved, I agree that we need the participation of all of the institutions and of course governments. If in some cases governments need to adjust policies, be more proactive, that's something that must happen for us to participate and promote the fulfillment of the SDGs.
Thank you, Jose. Maybe someone else wants to add on that? In the meantime, I can say we definitely believe at UNDP and of course at BCtA, we need to collaborate to achieve the goals and to achieve the challenge that we're facing right now. From innovative ideas and entrepreneurs to organizations such as the ones we have here, we are trying to articulate what we could do for communities and to solve the challenges and offer more value. We have a second question. It's from Samia Aboni, and maybe this is for Lucy. This is the question. So how are you reaching to communities without phones and bank accounts?
Sorry, so the question, can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. The question from Samia Awani. How are you reaching to communities without phones and bank accounts?
Oh, okay, I understand. So underserved community, I mentioned that most of them, like 47% of Latin population, don't have bank accounts, which means that they cannot access to the telemedicine service. Usually, well, the telemedicine service is provided those who have bank accounts or credit cards or so yes, but the thing is, so that's why we are providing, let's say we're selling the telemedicine service through the local pharmacies. Local pharmacies, you can buy just like buying a bottle of water, you can pay cash, right? With this, anyone can buy the telemedicine service just as easily as buying a bottle of water. And of course, there are cases, some patients don't have smartphones that we can talk to. In this case, there are always family members or friends who can help us to reach to these patients. And in the extreme cases, we need to call the home phone, but also we can actually realize the telemedicine service through this way as well.
See, and if you want to get in there with a reply. Okay, now we have our third questions, and maybe I'm gonna direct this to Camilo. It's a question from Miguel Hernandez. What is the role that a donor such as USAID can play in supporting this type of public-private partnerships and B2G models? I'm gonna repeat it. The question from Miguel Hernandez. What is the role that a donor such as USAID can play in supporting this type of public-private partnerships and B2G models?
Well, I think that donors, depending on their nature, kind of have to look at both parties. For example, here with USAID, we have some windows that work directly with the public sector and some programs that work directly with the private sector, identifying what are those needs and the technical assistance they may require. Maybe kind of piloting some initiatives and providing some capital to run some projects to identify if they are going to work or not. So I think it is important for all actors to identify where they can kind of target their efforts, their money. Here at USAID, we have those possibilities because we have the resources, we have the willingness of the mission, and the support, of course, of the United States government. But for companies that kind of have constraining resources, they have to leverage and kind of the trade-off between working directly with the private sector or the public sector, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilo. Regarding time, and thank you all for being here. We would like to thank all of you panelists and the participants for this fantastic discussion on the potential of government-led inclusive innovation and B2G models in providing essential goods and services to underserved communities. A very special thanks to our esteemed panelists, Milagros, Jose, David, Camilo, Lucy. Thank you very much for joining this panel and sharing your experiences with us. This session kickstarted the first day of the BCTA's 12th Annual Forum, an event on the sidelines of the 77th United Nations General Assembly. Join us for the upcoming session on transformative role of inclusive public procurement, where we'll discuss strategies and best practices for enhancing SME uptake in public procurement processes. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you there. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
2, 3. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our esteemed panelists and our audience from around the world today. I'm delighted for all of you to join us. My name is Karsten Hansen, and I'm the Chief of Global Procurement Services at the United Nations Development Programme. I've been invited to moderate our session today on inclusive public procurement, and specifically exploring opportunities for enhancing SME-based innovation uptake in public procurement processes. As we enter the final decade to implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, it is with an increasing sense of urgency that we review strategic actions available for achieving environmentally sustainability and address global social inequalities. The SDG 2030 agenda, and Goal 12.7 specifically, provides a wide platform for linking public procurement practices with sustainable development outcomes, thereby aligning public spend with national development objectives of governments and the wider international community. It is recognized that public procurement is an essential component of democratic governance, poverty reduction, and sustainable development. It is estimated to account for approximately 12% of the global GDP spend. Public procurement also serves as a powerful policy instrument that governments can use to propel changes in public service delivery, creating fiscal space and jobs, and to stimulate targeted private sector growth. Therefore, with sustainable development issues at the forefront of national agendas, adoption of meaningful, sustainable practices is now increasingly a requirement for public procurement to be truly considered fit for purpose. To advance sustainable development, it's critical to support private sector engagement in impact-driven public-private development partnerships. As a component of sustainable public procurement, the concept of inclusive public procurement is designed to maximize equitable economic, social, and environmental benefits with the primary aim of promoting supply diversity through economic inclusion across the supply chains. Inclusive public procurement can therefore play an important role in government procurement as an instrument for engaging SMEs and inclusive businesses in public procurement processes. In this context, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session, where we'll discuss the benefits and the challenges of enhancing SME uptake through inclusive public procurement principles and practices. And in extension, how enhancing SME-based innovation uptake in public procurement can support overall government sustainability objectives and help us address some of the many global challenges that are facing us today. To this end, in 2022, the Business Call to Action designed its guidelines on inclusive public procurement, defining standards, procedures, and processes to help guide public contractors and private sector entities on enhancing SME participation in public procurement. So on that note, I'm pleased to welcome Luciana Aguiar, Program Manager of UNDP Business Call to Action, to briefly introduce the key findings of the Inclusive Public Procurement Playbook, which is being launched today, and which you can now access via the link in the chat. Thank you and welcome, Luciana. Over to you.
Thank you, Karsten, for this introduction to the work that we have developed in partnership with the UNDP Bureau of Management Services, with your support, and also with the kind support of the Sweden Government Agency for Development Cooperation. In terms of the inclusive public procurement, as you know, we see it as a new way of looking at public procurement, under which the government meets its needs for goods and services through the private sector by engaging with small and medium enterprises, and particularly those that are implementing inclusive business models and they are being engaged in the public procurement processes. So this inclusive public procurement playbook is really presents the case for change towards inclusive public procurement. It, as you mentioned, defines the standards, procedures, strategies, and best practices for public procurement stakeholders to enhance suppliers' diversity while guaranteeing important public procurement principles. For the public sector, the Playbook guides public procurement actors on enhancing SME-based inclusive business solutions, really integrating best practices coming from the market so that governments can benefit from the lessons learned and particularly from the experience of these small enterprises that are reaching the last mile and that are in fact already serving populations that are living in low-income communities and helping them to reach the last mile. So better serving this population through these processes. For the private sector, the Playbook guides the small and medium enterprises, social enterprises, inclusive businesses on how to navigate the public procurement process with clarity, which is something that during the pandemic, we've seen many different ways of SMEs and inclusive business engaging with the government. But we in BCtA, we understand that this process needs to be more well facilitated. And we have observed a huge lack of information from either side, from the government and also from the enterprises that were delivering services under the crisis that you've seen recently. So the Playbook has identified 7 strategies. One that relates to pro-inclusive policy measures, so how to develop these policies and how to enhance these policies to better engage with small and medium enterprises. The preferential treatment and understanding what can be the criteria for implementing this type of preferential treatment. Procurement by lot, bid preference addressing particularly their limited capacity in the tender specifications and highlighting and helping to lead the government to do this in a more transparent and structured way, subcontracting and supporting SMEs' competitiveness, and most importantly, monitoring and reporting results so that we can really understand what are the benefits of this partnership and see how these services are being delivered to the end beneficiaries. As you see in the new release report, despite the challenges faced by the SMEs in going through the complexity of these hiring processes, you can see that the benefits for more inclusive public procurement, they are really clear in the Playbook, and it relates to diversifying competition, leveling the influence of established network of companies in the tender, increasing employment opportunities, and also it has also multiplier effects through decentralized procurement with a positive impact on local communities. So I hope we can have the opportunity to take a look at the Playbook. It was designed to help governments and to help small and medium enterprises to interact with governments in order to deliver best services to low-income populations and particularly to those that are living in the last mile. Thank you so much, Karsten, over to you.
Thank you so much, Luciana. And just confirming that we have a link available for the audience so they can access the Playbook online. Thank you. Now, we would like to take the opportunity to reflect a bit on the Playbook and the key messaging and discuss some of the benefits and challenges of enhancing SME-based innovation uptake in public procurement. So to this end, we have a panel of public procurement experts and specialists available on sustainable public procurement principles and practices. And I'd like to start with first a round of introduction of the 4 panelists, and then we will go to the question and answers part. Also inviting, of course, the audience to participate by asking questions or raising questions in the chat box, and we'll try to incorporate those questions as well in the conversation. So first, I'm very pleased to welcome Ralph Heinrich to this panel today. Ralph is the Secretary of the Committee on Innovation for Competitiveness and Public-Private Partnerships at UNECE. In this capacity, he advises governments in the UNECE region on innovation policy issues, including innovation enhancing procurement and high growth enterprises. So Ralph, thank you very much for joining us today. As an introduction, would you like to briefly share with us an overview of your work and how it connects to SME-based innovation in public procurement? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carsten, for inviting me to this very timely an important, and I would say increasingly urgent issue. I come to this issue, as you mentioned, from the innovation perspective. I manage an intergovernmental program in which our governments work together to create a more nurturing environment for innovation, and not just any innovation, but innovations in areas that are critical for sustainable development. As you all know, science, technology, and innovation are some of the key means of implementation of the entire 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, SDG 17. And as you all know, we are currently not on track, neither at the global level nor in the UNECE region, to achieve sustainable development by 2030. That's where the urgency comes from. We need to accelerate progress, and in order to do so, we need more innovation. Simply put, we cannot continue with business as usual. We need to find ways of producing and consuming in a better, more sustainable way, and that is what innovation is all about. And so in the work that we've been doing with our governments, we have increasingly focused on the role of public procurement, including with and for small and medium-sized enterprises in fostering this kind of innovation. We believe it can be a great way to bring sustainability into the public sector, which is very important because the public sector is so big that we cannot achieve overall sustainability if the operations of the public sector itself do not become sustainable. But at the same time, it can be a great way to catalyze the uptake of innovations in the private sector at large. And so we have done work developing some good practices on the basis of an international policy dialogue. We have done studies and policy analysis at the national level. We've developed policy recommendations for governments, and then we have been working with governments to help them implement those policy recommendations in this area that they are taking, that they wanted to take on board. And so the main message that I would like to get you, to leave you with today is that innovation enhancing procurement and involving SMEs in this procurement is very important, and we need more of it. But it also has its challenges, its costs and risks. So it's not for everyone. It's not for all procurement needs, and it's also not for all SMEs. And I look forward to expanding on this message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph. And we look forward to hearing more on that perspective. And I like the message as well. It's not time for business as usual. There's a sense of urgency in terms of meeting the SDG targets, and we need to find innovative ways of meeting that objective. So thank you, Ralph, for that presentation. So I'd like to move on and introduce Nina Wittmark. So Nina is a public procurement analyst at Binova, which is the Swedish governmental agency for innovation. And I'm so impressed that you have that agency in place. Nina, thank you for joining us today. As an introduction, would you also like to share with us an overview of what you do at Binova and how it connects to SME-based innovation in public procurement in Sweden? Thank you.
Oh, certainly, thank you. Well, the main goal with Binova is actually quite similar to what Ralph was describing. I mean, we existed in this form and in former iterations as an agency that tries to foster innovation or foster conditions for innovation. Rather, you can't force innovation; it has to be conditions. But the latest years, we've been working very hard with sustainability and the Agenda 2030. So that's our big main goal, and that's basically drives everything we do. So I'm not going to go into that further because I think Ralph gave a beautiful summary of why this is important and how to go about this. So instead, I'm going to go into what we do then practically at Binova to bring this about. We're mostly a financing agency, and what we finance is sort of demand-driven research and also innovation projects of different kinds. And it can be specific projects where you try to get a certain solution as the end goal, or it could be, again, framework conditions, like making sure that there are innovation offices at universities, for example. And I'm more in the framework condition business. I've been working with innovation procurement since 2006. And again, with the whole impact logic that Ralph explained, that's why we do this, why we're interested. And obviously then with the SMEs, we have actually a strategic area at Binova working exclusively with innovative SMEs, because some of them are really very agile and very innovative in a way that not all big companies are. And we want to connect them then, not only to larger companies that can help them scale, for example, but also to public procurement to sort of provide that innovation kick that only they can do, actually. And I know we're going to go into the challenges and opportunities with this later, so I'll stop here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for joining us, and really looking forward at ICLE, which stands for Local Governments for Sustainability. He's also co-leads the United Nations One Planet Network on sustainable public procurement, and is a member of the European Commission's Green Public Procurement Advisory Group. So here we are going from an intergovernmental perspective to a governmental perspective in Sweden, and now to a local government perspective, perhaps, Mark, from your side. So would you like to share a little bit about how your work connects with SME uptake and SME innovation-based innovation? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carsten. Yeah, and thank you for the invitation to be on the panel. Yeah, ICLE is a global network of more than 2,500 local and regional governments that want to implement sustainable urban development. Cities actually recognized over 25 years ago the importance of procurement as a mechanism to achieve this. So we've been working on the topic and have a global program for over 25 years. And essentially what we've been doing with cities is demonstrating the value of innovation, circular, sustainable procurement. We facilitate collaboration between local governments and public authorities. We facilitate collaboration and replication as well, and develop methodologies and tools that support implementation. One of the key topics that comes out of that from the city's perspective, particularly politicians, is supporting SMEs. And social economy enterprises, startups as well. And we do this through developing capacity for city to business collaboration. For example, looking at needs assessment, market intelligence, pre-procurement, market dialogue, and supply chain management between cities and SMEs. Yeah, so put simply, this was recognized as a key mechanism to implement sustainable development, both procurement and working with SMEs. Helps achieve a city's social, environmental, and economic goals.
Exciting, Mark. Thank you very much. And really, I would like to take the opportunity to thank ICLE for sharing the tools and methodologies over time. As a procurement practitioner myself, I've been benefiting from your guidelines over the years, so I appreciate that for sure, and looking forward to hearing your perspective on the local governance perspective. So finally, Marta Endhoff. Welcome to the panel. So Marta is an associate professor in public procurement law at the University of Copenhagen, and she's an internationally recognized expert in EU and public procurement law and sustainability. She is the leader of the Purchasing Power Sustainable Public Procurement Through Private Law Enforcement project. It's a long one. And of course, the Sapiens Network, which you may wish to just elaborate on what that means, and the co-host of the popular BCtA Public Procurement podcast that some of you might have benefited from listening to as well. So thank you, Marta, for joining us today and providing sort of the legal perspective on sustainability in procurement law. Thank you, Marta. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Carsten. Thank you for the kind invitation and such a lovely introduction. It's my great pleasure to join everyone within this panel. That is true that I'm usually coming to those panels as the person that highlights a limitation of our approaches. And that is very often connected with the fact that public procurement is very highly regulated, that also the today launched Inclusive Public Procurement Playbook acknowledges. And for us to be able to really deliver those policy goals, we need to be able to work within existing regulatory regimes, but also in my work as an academic, also maybe highlight the points where the regulations needs to be more dynamically adapted to the need. So I will contribute today with the perspective mainly from the European public procurement law framework, where the SMEs are crucial and essential, and that's where the work comes really into play. We have approximately, the standard numbers are 99% of European market are currently SMEs, which account to approximately 23.1 million SMEs really in 2022 on the market. So what that means for public procurement and public procurement law more specifically, well, that means that if we can increase the number of their participation in the tenders, we hopefully can get more competition. We hopefully can lead to achieving the better deal on the end of it. But at the same time, SMEs are very closely connected to the local denominator. It's when we spending taxpayers' money, we want to spend them in the way also that ultimately is reallocated within the economies. They, as Nina mentioned, they innovate, they employ much more than many of the international companies. So where that really comes in, and that is also very much included, that perspective and that focus in the Sapiens network that Karsten mentioned. Sapiens network is a large Europe Horizon 2020 project that got a couple tens of million euro to conduct over 3 years research on various aspects of sustainable public procurement. I'm very much would urge anyone who is interested in that subject matter to check out our website. We just launched open access sustainable public procurement law course, which is fully open, available to anyone who wishes to get educated more within that subject matter.
Thank you very much, Marta. Absolutely highlighting those courses on your website. I know we have taken advantage of those and they are excellent. So thank you for sharing that as well. Yes, I think it's really important to have a legal perspective in this conversation. Again, me as a procurement practitioner, I think as public procurement practitioners in general, we are risk averse. We are custodians of taxpayers' money. We are under scrutiny and for good reason. So we want to make sure that we abide by the rules and regulations that guide our work. And when we talk about sustainability and sustainability integration and rollout in public procurement, it's so important that we have that legal dimension as the foundation for taking that forward. So thank you, Marta, for joining us today and to contributing to this conversation. So thank you, everyone, for the introduction. I would like to loop back to Ralph to kick off the session. And Ralph, perhaps we can start with, fundamentally, what are the benefits and challenges of enhancing SME-based innovation uptake through inclusive public procurement from your perspective, working with the many different governments that you are engaged with?
Thank you for the question, Karsten. Yes, indeed, there are benefits and challenges, and of course, they exist on both sides. They exist in the public sector and they exist on the side of innovative SMEs. And it's important to weigh the opportunities and the risks involved in an innovation procurement with SMEs and the benefits and the costs appropriately and to get the process right. On the side of the public sector, one of the key benefits is really that it's a way to bring innovation in. And I think it is critical, in my opinion, to make the public sector itself more sustainable. We cannot do that without procurement bringing in innovation into the public sector. The public sector delivers a host of essential services to the entire economy: healthcare, education, infrastructure, public security, you name it. And the governments at all levels have a responsibility to deliver those services in a sustainable way. Otherwise, we can't meet our sustainable development commitments. Scaling back those essential services in order, for instance, to reduce our footprints is clearly not an option. So we have to find a way to maintain or even expand those services, also in the spirit of inclusiveness, and do so while reducing, for instance, our environmental footprints. For innovative SMEs, having access to the public sector as a client can potentially make all the difference between survival or going under, or between stagnation and growth. And here it's perhaps important to emphasize that not all SMEs are equal. It's true that SMEs are of general significance because they employ a large fraction of the workforce in every economy. And so from that perspective, one could perhaps say they should be allowed access to public procurement simply on fairness grounds, on grounds of leveling the playing field. But we should also recognize that most SMEs are not really dynamic. They don't grow. They don't provide lots of additional jobs. They're also not very productive. They don't necessarily provide high-paying jobs. And they're also, in general, not necessarily at the cutting edge of sustainability in their operations. So most SMEs remain small. And so we can question how important they are for the economy in a dynamic perspective if we want to achieve sustainable development. And we can question whether how much we should support those SMEs and whether there is scope for doing more for the small fraction of SMEs that are actually different, that are highly innovative, and that are actually growing very fast, that are very productive, that are providing good jobs, and that are able to develop new solutions to sustainability challenges. So we call them innovative high growth enterprises at UNEC. Some people call them gazelles. Because these have such a disproportionate impact potentially on the economy, we need to look at what barriers do they face and how can we help them overcome those barriers. And when we talk to companies, when we go into countries and we talk to companies, SMEs that are actually not very innovative, and we ask them why, we often hear, well, we don't want to take the risk of innovating because we don't feel that there will be a market for our products, or we hear we lack the funding that we would need to pay for R&D and to cushion the risk that this involves in terms of cash flow, etc. Public procurement budgets are huge, and even if only a small part of them could be used for innovation procurement and for engaging innovative startups and SMEs, that could make a huge difference. The public sector can act as a lead customer, as an early adopter that allows the innovator to prove that their concept actually works and that it works at scale. And in this way, the public sector can help innovative companies to penetrate private markets, maybe even to seed entirely new markets. And we do have great examples of programs that do this. For instance, the Small Business Innovation and Research Program in the United States, or the EU Procurement Directive, which enables pre-commercial procurement, innovation partnerships in procurement, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all programs where the public sector can take a chunk, possibly a small chunk of its procurement budget, and fund innovative SMEs at an early stage, fund research and development, fund proof of concept studies, fund the development of prototypes, fund initial production. And again, this can make all the difference for innovative SMEs and whether they are able to thrive or whether they will just wither on the stem.
Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate that. So clearly that the SME uptake in public procurement is important for diversifying competition, enhancing employment, enhancing competition in general. But on the innovation side, I think your message is clear that not all SMEs are equal, and there's some trade-offs in the innovation space that public procurement should be considering. So perhaps a good segue, to the work of Binova. Because you are actually providing those supporting frameworks, if you wish, for SMEs with an innovation potential. And would you like to maybe, based on your work at Binova, talk a little bit about how innovation integration actually works in public procurement and how we can support innovative SMEs in this space? Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. Well, when I started doing this, I'm going to go into a short anecdote. We thought that if we provide funding for public sector to try doing innovation procurement, they will come and a lot of projects will happen and we will get to study the effects and so on. So we tried that several years and it's been so hard getting applications to do this. So, okay, so obviously there's more to this question than just, do we have a funding, not only for their own sake, to do the work, but also to help fund the companies. Like Ralph spoke about the innovation partnerships. We had money for that as well. And we found projects, obviously, but not as many as we wanted to. So my takeaway from this, and several others in Sweden, is that the innovation integration, it demands something of these public sector entities. They have to, at minimum, have some sort of decent level of portfolio strategy when they go into different procurements. This need of finding, niches or areas where innovation procurement actually is feasible and interesting. And they sort of have to see both, well, where it's relevant for their own needs, but also where it's actually feasible, because for that you actually need to have a good market knowledge, knowing, when is this possible for companies to actually innovate around? Is it possible at all? So, and this in turn means then that the public organization, they have to be ready to sort of, they have to have processes ready, how to cooperate within itself, between core activities, between the procurers, between people who work with development and innovation. I found a lot of different sort of projects, and I'm sorry to say that standard is that people who work with innovation and development, they almost get chills when they hear the word procurement, and it's too sad because it's such an important, it could be such an interesting leverage. And then we come to the challenges. This is just innovation challenges. And then the challenges with the SMEs specifically, like we spoke about, it's such a lot of potential in them, or in parts of them, in the gazelles, for the gazelle-like SMEs. But it's not always easy for them to compete in public procurements. So you really need to think about how you construct the procurement in itself to make it interesting for the SMEs and easy for them to access. They're not always stable suppliers. So again, you have to go into some sort of portfolio strategy and some sort of idea of long-term, what market you actually want to encourage as a public procurer. Where can you experiment? Where can you sort of try these more innovative procurements? It's not going to be a big new IT system, for example. That would be almost suicide. It needs to be, you need to find the specific area and the industry where this is interesting. And also, is there anything you can do to encourage scaling and robustness of these SMEs? Can you encourage them, for example, to cooperate with larger companies? You can actually work with that as a public procurer if you're very advanced. I've seen systems of it, but it's quite unusual. Or is there a good SME support system already ready in this country, or in reachable stages? Do they have access to incubators? Do they have access to risk capital? How easy is that, and so on? And also, of course, just thinking about the procurement conditions, how would you dispose IPR if someone developed a new solution? And the secret tip here is always that if the company has access to it, of course, they have a foundation for scaling. I'm not sure about time. Do you want some real life examples?
Yeah, absolutely, Nina. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead and give your example. I have a couple of questions, but go ahead with your example. Thank you.
Well, just a few short ones. In the region of Skåne, they were very active for a while, and they did do one procurement where they encouraged SME and larger company cooperation. It was part of the pre-process. They had like network meetings and mingle meetings so that they get that, because they knew they wanted to buy something of scale if they managed to develop new interesting solutions. And they wanted to sort of couple them up to get that SME innovativeness into the more robustness of a larger company. So that was interesting. And we also work with different sort of, not innovation partnership exactly, but different sort of ways to get development contributions to the SMEs so that we can actually get some sort of money kickback for doing developments and lessen the risk for them. So.
Okay, so no, thanks, Nina, for sharing that. You mentioned coupling SMEs up with bigger corporations so you can address the issue of scalability. Do you have an example of how you encourage that collaboration with larger companies, for SMEs to work with larger companies? I believe it's one of the strategies as well in the inclusive procurement playbook.
Yes, I mean, apart from what the Skåne region did with, networking events, that sort of thing, I've seen in Norway, they had a specific program, actually. It's like a sister agency to Binova. They also do innovation support. And they had a program designed to get large companies to buy from smaller companies, and also public procurement to sort of buy from smaller companies. And they actually paid money for them to be coupled up. Had to think really carefully though about the setup of this so that it wouldn't leave unfair advantages.
Yeah, I think we'll leave that one for Marta at the end. But good points. Thank you very much. So basically what you're also saying a bit is that you're pushing it back to the public procurement entities, that they need to develop the capacity. They need to construct the procurement tenders in a meaningful way that is more inviting to the SMEs to participate, that they can proactively go out and make this collaboration happen. And I think you used a term when we spoke earlier, bandwidth, that the procurement entity has to have the bandwidth and the resources to engage with SMEs, which perhaps links a bit to what Ralph was saying, that since most public procurement entities are not usually over-resourced, you would have to make that prioritization between where is that trade-off really paying off. So thanks, Nina, for that. I'd like to move on to Mark. So Mark, you sort of come with the local governance perspective here. What, from your perspective, are some of the benefits of SME engagement at sort of the municipal level, and how do you see the challenges and the opportunities play out in that space?
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Yeah, I mean, for the cities, there's a number of benefits of working with SMEs. I mean, SMEs are really crucial in accelerating the scale up of transformation that's needed, the energy transformation, addressing climate change and adaptation. So they're just simply important to implement a city's sustainability action plans. And they're also key in obtaining specific solutions to needs or challenges. In many cases, a need for a city is not necessarily buying a product or a particular service. They need a response from businesses and SMEs for a solution. They want them to come up with solutions. And SMEs can fill that gap, particularly in niche areas. SMEs are particularly more agile. Many large infrastructure projects are implemented by bigger companies. But they tend to have standard one-size-fits-all solutions, which is not what cities need. They're also closer to cities. So in terms of meeting the social goals, as I mentioned earlier, creating new jobs, reskilling and upskilling workforces, SMEs can be more agile in that sense, particularly at a regional level. And then they are certainly, it depends which region you're in. Coming from a European perspective, they can adapt to more tailor-made new business models, which is what's needed to address some of the key societal challenges at the moment. There's also benefits for the SMEs. They have access to valuable public sector clients. They can commercialize ideas and research. With many startups, it's not about starting up, it's about scaling up to keep them on the market and to bring products to a wider audience. The barriers, it's not as complicated actually as many I think people think. There are, of course, many difficulties, some legal issues, of course, but actually what's happening is cities are always doing public procurement, how they've been doing it for the past 20 years. I've also seen that actually people just continue to use the same call for tender for 10, 15 years, 4 or 5 different contracts. They don't update them. You mentioned, I think, Carson, at the start, the risk associated with smaller cities working with smaller businesses, particularly from a political perspective. You can only get things wrong a few times without it coming back on the politicians, particularly the mayors. Contracting authorities, cities, actually unaware of what SMEs are available, even in their regions. So they don't know the types of goods and services that they can actually provide. So another barrier is the resource and capacity issues, both in terms of cities being able to work with SMEs, particularly in the pre-procurement phase or the market dialogue. And that's the same for SMEs. They also don't have the resource and capacity issues to respond to calls for tenders and put in a proposal, in particular if they're asking for life cycle costing and meeting eco-label requirements. Again, that's sort of very much European, but I know in other regions as well, it's an issue. So SMEs also, like cities, don't know how to use market dialogue to the benefit of both. So actually for the barriers, it's not necessarily about legal issues or changing the way cities work. It's actually about changing behavior in many cases, from heads of unit, not just procurers, but heads of unit, the people who manage the budgets. And it's actually developing the soft skills and showing the benefits. This is where we're coming from our work.
Thank you, Mark. That's a really good contribution, very encouraging as well in terms of what the SMEs can bring forward in the local governance space. So really that the SMEs can provide those tailor-made solutions that bigger companies may not be able to do. I like the term that you used, that they are closer to the cities, are also closer to the needs perhaps, right? And can better understand what the cities can benefit from. But again, you're pushing it back to the public procurement entities. We need to do better, right? If we really want to solicit the creativity of the SME innovation space, we need to do better in making our tenders more friendly, innovation friendly. Definitely not do the recycling that you were referring to, Mark. Also, you were talking about soft skills. I really liked that point. We've discussed it earlier, Mark, as well. We need to become better at engaging in market dialogue, understanding how to manage that as well in a public procurement space. I think as practitioners, sometimes we're afraid of engaging too closely with suppliers, right? So that's also, we need to understand what the boundaries are and how to manage that dialogue in a way that's consistent with our rules and regulations. But really the term behavioral change is at the core of this, something that we have been studying as well. And I know you, Mark, at ICLE, you were working on a piece referring to behavioral change, right, as sort of the key missing component of sustainability integration. So looking forward to that being finalized and in the public. So thanks, Mark, for that. Marta. So a couple of references to legal issues and concerns, of course, which you would be very, very familiar with. So what are some of these emerging legal perspectives on SME engagement? Is there a framework that we can put in place to better guide public procurement entities in navigating this in a legal perspective?
Sure, thank you so much, Carsten. The benefit or the challenge of coming as fourth is that on the one hand side, I can undoubtedly really just join in agreeing very much to the comments that have been made so far, and I need to come up with something new. So let's see how that goes. No, I would like to start with saying that I absolutely agree with both Mark and Carsten when it comes to the behavioral change. We published some studies a couple of years ago with this notion of the need for the agents of change. So undoubtedly, I think if we are to really highlight the biggest issue, it would be that one. So not necessarily the legal one. I also agree with Mark that there's actually a fair bit that you already can do. However, we are stuck really in this way of doing things the same way time after time. And that is also connected with a risk. So while Carsten mentioned that as a public procurer, you do not like risk, if you come to any lawyer, they hate risk the most in their life. So that's why we usually, when we enter the room, it's a bit like dun, dun, dun type of thing, because we very rarely come and say, yes, of course, let's do that. We usually say, well, this is all the reasons why we advise you not to do that. But I would try to not to do it in that particular form today. What I would like to do is address, because in the question that Carsten posted, there are a couple of different elements. So I'd like to start with giving you a couple comments regarding specifically risk and challenges from a legal perspective when we're dealing with SMEs and innovation. Then a couple words on the need of recognition of the differences between operating with policies and regulatory frameworks, because the policies might be something that would be nice to have, but if the law that you currently have in your jurisdiction is prohibiting you to do that, no amount of good policies is going to help you. And the last bit that I would like to highlight is to a little bit reflect, again, specifically with the European concept, but I think many jurisdictions broadly have a similar approach of what type of initiatives have been rolling out to facilitate both for innovations in public procurement and the SME participation. So when it comes to the risk with SMEs, or the challenges with SMEs, it is for procurement lawyer or legal counsel assisting contracting authorities, it is the risk, and once again, risk. What I mean by that? Well, the first thing that we would consider is, on the one hand side, the efficiency, the value for money, and the need for aggregation. So what I mean by that? Well, if we're going for the bigger, the better. From efficiency perspective and from value perspective, very often that might nudge us towards big suppliers. Why? Because you're dealing just with one company, not, let's say, with 15 lots. So resource-wise, it's less of a problem. Also, if you buy in a big bulk, you may get a nice, decent discount on your purchase. So again, that's something that when it comes to value for money would make us happy. That is also as a challenge that occurs when it comes to this aggregation of procurement versus division into smaller lots, or even just a smaller contracts that will be fully addressed to SMEs, is largely also connected with administrative makeup of the jurisdiction that you're in. So some countries are structured administratively in a way that you centralize as much as your procurement as possible. So then it will be very difficult to, again, fully embrace the SMEs approach versus others that are much more delocalized and decentralized, or localized being decentralized, that might be more prone in the scale of actually targeting SMEs. Now, another issue that we tend to see is the notion of resilience of SMEs. This is something that has been very much at the forefront as the COVID-19 was rolling out. How resilient the SMEs are under stressful situations, and it is indirectly also connected with the questions of liquidity of SMEs. Unfortunately, again, how majority of public buyers operate with the quite long deadlines for paying for the contracts. Unfortunately, we see time and time again that the public buyers will run the SMEs to liquidation of bankruptcy, because if you need to wait 90 days to be paid out, many SMEs will have quite big of a challenge of that. And last but not least, there is also a question of professionalism, and I wouldn't want that to be misconstrued. This is not to say that SMEs are not professional, but public procurement is very specific beast, highly regulated, highly formalized. It does not really work that if you're not sure about something, you can pick up the phone and ask your future client what I can change, how I can do it differently. You, so to speak, have one shot on submitting that tender, and you cannot really go back and forth and change things. This requires a certain skill of knowing how you engage within procurement process. And that is a bit, at times, problematic, this very formalistic approach. So that when it comes to some comments on SMEs, on innovation, well, again, from the procurement law perspective, it's a bit tricky because you need to be able to write your technical specification, meaning you need to be able to write what it is that you're buying. So when you're buying innovation, which in itself, of course, has a certain level of unknown and things can change along the innovative process, this to a certain extent raises a challenge that, of course, can be addressed, but I'm just putting that on the map that we need to be aware that this is a little bit different type of procurement. That is also connected at the execution phase of the public contract. If things change with innovation, which is so to speak written in the character of innovation, it's problematic from a procurement contract perspective. If you change too much, then it accounts to what we refer to as unlawful modification of the contract, which in the end leads to the fact that you awarded without having an open tender contract, which is probably in context of procurement law the highest breach that you can conduct. So you can get yourself in quite a bit of troubles. Now, there is also, in context of innovation, the need for flexibility, which this need for flexibility is problematic, again, in which jurisdiction you are, because in those jurisdictions that still deals fair a bit with the issues of corruption, this is a big no-no. The more flexibility you give to the parties, the higher risk of encountering type of corruptions. Now, policy versus law. It is very nice, and we all like to have policies. I myself had a pleasure of contributing to a couple, but what you need to always have in mind that never mind what great policies are in place, if the law prohibits you doing certain things, no lawyer will give you a green light to do that. So, for example, for current European legislative system, as much as we would want to have promotion of local food bought from local farmers, you cannot do it if the contracts trigger EU law. You cannot give preferential treatments. You cannot really have a strategies of specific inclusion for SMEs and so on. So I'm giving you the most rigid example of European perspective. Please have in mind that, as also the Playbook indicates, in many different parts of the world, you can do more. So we're hoping that we learn and we're going to do better. And the last bit, to wrap it all up, because I know I'm running slightly over time, I got too excited. Forgive me for that, Karsten. The last bit that I would want to just indicate is, so what we did with law currently that actually indicates some help. In context of SMEs, in the newest European set of rules, we nudged towards division of lots. We nudged to what we refer to European single procurement document, which is narrowing down the formalistic requirements from SMEs to lower the burden of entering the procurement process. We also predicted a direct payments to subcontractors, which can be helpful. And we combined the pre-commercial procurement with commercial procurement stage through introduction of procedural innovation partnership to hopefully merge those two elements to escape the risks that are present there. I promise to take back those 3 minutes with my next question. Thank you for that.
No, thank you, Marta. That was extremely helpful. Thank you for breaking down what we decided to call the pain points, right, from a legal perspective on implementing SME-based innovation. So lots of things you raised here, Marta, but I like the point about resilience of SMEs, because I think perhaps it could work both ways, right? So there was a concern about SMEs being maybe more or less financially resilient, referring to the COVID-19 situation, but exactly the COVID-19 situation also showed the vulnerability of globalization, of supply chain disruption, and perhaps resilience lies in the fact that you have a localized SME-based support behind your supply chains rather than a global, international, larger company. So a point to reflect on there. And then again, Marta, you brought it back to the foundation of the law, that we can have all our good intentions and policies and guidelines, but if, of course, we refer back to the law itself. So there is that overall framework that needs to be addressed at the government level. But you also, again, pushed it back to the procurement entities, right? Saying maybe there's some things we need to relearn. We have been taught for decades that we need to consolidate because that gives us the best value for money. We audited on that. We reduce transaction cost. We encourage our buyers, or we force them to have contract discipline, as we say, against our systems contracts to make sure that we achieve that objective. But that is very potentially contradictory to the notion of working with SMEs and inviting them into that process. So really the idea of breaking it down into smaller lots that are manageable by smaller companies to address the issue of scalability would be quite key. And maybe coming back to the point that Nina raised about, we have to look at how we construct the tender document itself in that regard. And then, of course, Marta, you mentioned and used the term need for agents of change, coming back to these sort of institutional capacity and professionalization of the public procurement entities themselves. So that sort of leads me back to Ralph and a question to you. So from your perspective, what differentiates governments and local contexts in terms of enabling SME-based innovation uptakes? And what are the government side enablers which you see could better facilitate SME-based innovation uptake?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think what I have to say dovetails very neatly with what has been said before by basically everyone in terms of the challenges that we see and the responses that we might consider. Just maybe two remarks on the question of resilience. On the one hand, I think the COVID pandemic has shown also that some SMEs are more resilient because they're able to pivot quite quickly. And again, that pertains more to innovative SMEs rather than to transitional, more stagnant sort. And the other point is related to policy. One reason why big companies are sometimes more resilient is because they have more clout with governments, and they're more effective in lobbying governments for support. Whereas SMEs, no SME is systemically important, so they have no or much less of a shot of getting support. But this is just as side remarks. Now, coming back to the actual question, traditional procurement is relatively straightforward. At the risk of simplifying, you basically specify what kind of product you want to buy. You maybe specify some minimum criteria in addition to cost, but basically you publish the tender and you buy from the lowest bidder. Innovation enhancing procurement, particularly the kind that involves SMEs, startups, is much more complicated, as was already pointed out. You need to specify not necessarily the product that you want to buy, but you need to specify the need that you want to fill. You need to include performance criteria other than lowest price, such as sustainability performance, etc., which again may create additional problems for SMEs to document that they meet some of these requirements. But this is, of course, a major issue when it comes to developing new solutions. You often need to consider a life cycle cost approach, because innovative solutions may almost by their nature be more expensive at the point of buying them in cash terms, but they may actually have a cost advantage over the entire product life cycle. And so we may need to be able to factor that in. And that again speaks to the question of the requirements of going for value for money. You need, as a procurement agency, as a final buyer, to engage with the market at the very beginning in order to understand which potential solutions are already available, what technological possibilities may exist for developing better solutions. So you need to engage with the business sector before you actually start the procurement process and a competitive dialogue, pre-commercial dialogue, etc. And then,
Ralph, if I may ask, I think in our preliminary conversation, you actually had a really good case referring to how SMEs could fill that space. I'm a little bit cognizant of time, but if you maybe in 1 minute could just refer to that case, because I think it was very illustrative of how it could work.
Yes. Okay. So, but I will come back to the points I wanted to make. So the case that we had at a recent conference was retrofitting buildings to make them net zero. As you know, the built environment is responsible for about 1/3 of global climate gas emissions. And we have a lot of technologies that can make buildings net zero. And they are being increasingly deployed in new buildings, but we of course have a huge stock of existing buildings, which are anything but net zero. And so there are companies that are developing innovative solutions to retrofit buildings to make them net zero. And we have examples where governments have acted, again, as I mentioned before, as lead customers, as early adopters that help these companies to get their innovations off the ground. Actually, if I may add, the main company that we had at our meeting was actually quite a big company, but it does have subcontractors that have developed some of the innovative solutions. And in fact, one of the solutions was developed as part of the US Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's a company that is producing coatings for windows that can turn any window basically into a solar panel. And that is something that can, of course, be used basically to retrofit everything. Anyway, I wanted to come back to the point that if we want to go into innovation procurement, we need to have the possibility to finance innovation, at an early stage, R&D, proof of concept, initial manufacturing. And so all of this, in my opinion, raises three main challenges for procurement agencies. One is what could be subsumed under the heading, again, of behavioral change, or the capacity of procurement agencies to deal with these complexities, engaging with the market at an early stage, managing contracts that go beyond simple value for money, that go beyond buying the cheapest offer. Then we have risk, as again was mentioned before, the risks from a legal perspective, but also from an economic perspective. For instance, you might finance R&D by a startup company, but at the end, you might not get a viable product. Or the risk that there might be a product that's viable in principle, but the SME might not be able to deliver the production at scale. So there are these kinds of risks. And then, of course, we have the antitrust, competition, state aid concerns that need to be addressed at the level of law and regulations. So on the one hand, innovation enhancing procurement, bringing in SMEs would, as you already mentioned, Carsten, ideally required to give the procurement agencies and the final buyers a lot of flexibility so that they can actually engage with the market and they can make discretionary choices on what to buy rather than just buying the cheapest one. But on the other hand, the capacity needs to be there to do it right. And in countries, in settings where the capacity is low, including where the transparency is low in the public procurement process, where there are corruption concerns, of course, you don't want the procurement agency to have a lot of discretion. You want to make the rules, the laws, the regulations kind of rigid. And that creates a dilemma because that, of course, significantly constrains the ability to engage in innovation enhancing procurement and to bring innovative SMEs into the fold. And so perhaps the takeaway is that we need to be pragmatic also in where and when we use innovation enhancing procurement and where we bring innovative SMEs in. It doesn't make sense to try to make all procurement about innovation. If you're going to procure new office chairs, you just do it the traditional way. So just reserve it, reserve the capacity that you have, reserve the capacity to take risks that you have for those areas where you really need to procure something that doesn't exist, or where you really want to find out whether what you're doing it in the right way or whether there's a better way of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ralph. Some really good points you raise here. So firstly, not all SMEs are equal, you said in the first round. And secondly, not all institutional frameworks and public procurement entities are equal. And that really comes back to the notion of capacity, having the capacity to deal with the complexity of managing SMEs and in extension, managing the innovation space. Also like the dimension of the economic risk, this notion that in public procurement, perhaps we are less willing to accept failure, which is something that you would have to accept in innovation. Not all innovation projects turn out right. And there needs to be a pre-agreement that is acceptable, I guess. So really good points. I'm cognizant that we have 6 minutes left of this session, but I would like to come back to Mark because Mark, I'm monitoring the sort of municipality space and local government space. And it seems to me that the local governments are much better at harnessing the SME engagement and innovation space. Why do you think that is? You alluded to a little bit that they're closer to the market perhaps, but could you elaborate on that point briefly? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. I think cities in particular have been leading the way in terms of sustainable innovation procurement and working with SMEs on that. I mean, this is partly due to the political backing and the understanding of the benefits it has for the cities, but also supporting SMEs, and particularly at the local and regional level. When we're talking outside of Europe, this is quite key, and many public authorities and cities can work directly with local and regional organizations. In Europe, it is more difficult because of the single market. But also, and actually this is something that Ralph mentioned, we haven't talked about it much, but lowest price, again, particularly outside of Europe. In many cases, cities and public authorities are not willing to go beyond the lowest price in terms of criteria. I mean, in many cases in Africa, it's actually in the legislation, you have to choose the lowest price, some other regions as well. But actually cities and regions are trying to push that and go beyond that. So they're willing to do that because they see the benefits. They know they need to act on climate, the current climate crisis with the pandemic, for example, because they're seeing the impacts directly at cities. Yeah, you said the relationship is easier. It can be with SMEs. You can meet SMEs, particularly from the region for cities. But I think there's a number of actions that really can be done here to work and replicate what cities and regions are doing. And I think it's about learning about the process, the factors that have made a success of working with SMEs and replicating the methodology, not necessarily replicating the product or service because they can differ in each city, but the methodology I think is quite key, and having specific guidance on how to engage, do the market engagement, and cities are willing to do this. Also, from a city perspective, they're willing to look at the pre-procurement. Sometimes it's too late if you're just looking at putting technical criteria into a procurement process. It's too late. You need to look at the market before, we call it market intelligence, find out what's possible, what can SMEs offer, what's up and coming through the research and development. This is quite key.
No, thank you, Mark. There's a question from the audience challenging all of us to reflect on how can procurement simplify its operations so it can focus on generating more value. And here, Mark, you were talking about replicating methodologies. Perhaps there's been mention of market dialogue. There's been mention of constructing templates in a more SME-friendly way. Nina, from your perspective, from an innovation perspective, what would you say would be a way, what would be sort of the enabling conditions that would need to be in place to support SME engagement?
Oh, certainly. There's been so many interesting things. I'm just trying to organize what.
And we have 2 minutes left, by the way.
Okay, super short then. In Sweden, what we've been looking at. First of all, you need to have some sort of support, both for public procurement organizations and also for the SMEs that actually want to participate, like a procurement authority, a procurement network, something to help people just along with methodology. There has to be some sort of, like was pointed out by Mark, some sort of methodology of how to engage with the market. We have examples like that in Sweden, like something called demand accelerators, for example. There's a Norwegian innovation procurement program, which is also designed to get that sort of dialogue happening and just how to go about it practically. If you can do anything to increase the bandwidth, which we spoke about earlier, for public procurement organizations, like, for example, organized buyers groups, so they can coordinate market dialogues and coordinate understanding what's out there and so on to get a bit more of scale. It's not scaling in the procurements itself, just scaling in how to engage with the market and find out what's there. So that's super interesting. And then I would say, because I have to, because I'm from Binova, but innovation management, some sort of behavioral change on how you think about your public service delivery. Do you want to deliver public services today exactly the same way you always done, and sometimes even in a way which isn't very modern anymore if you use the same 10 documents which you spoke about for 15 years? Is that really value for taxpayers' money in the long term? So just getting that sort of a little bit more of a long-term perspective and helping organizations to get that. And that's something I think is needed from almost national support perspective, how to go from this very, operation today until a bit more of a long-term scheme. And it's not only with innovation, it's with resilience that was mentioned before. What sort of market do you want to be on? What you need to be able to deliver public services in 5 or 10 years?
No, thank you, Nina. We have 1 minute left, so unfortunately I would have to sort of consolidate and recap a bit on our conversation. But thank you so much, Nina, for that helpful comment as well. Just wondering if that guideline or methodology might be available. I have to say, by the way, Nina, I'm so grateful to the Swedish government for all the sustainability material that has been produced and translated into English on all your websites across all your agencies. It's benefited a lot of us over time. So thank you for making that effort. So I think I need to recap on this particular conversation and thank you again. It's been a really great opportunity from different perspectives to approach the issue of SME engagement and also how we can harness the energy and potential innovation that is in this ecosystem and bring that forward. So I think the very much in line with the wider sustainability discussion when we talk about integration, the challenge really is multiple, right? There is the policy regulatory framework, as Marta mentioned. It needs to be anchored in law. Policy guidelines are nice to have, but they need to link to the law. So there's an issue here from the perspective of governments to facilitate this legal framework. Then there's some very important reference to behavioral change and how public procurement entities themselves need to change their mindset to facilitate this discussion. And that goes back to capacity. How do we manage market dialogues? How do we take a portfolio approach and identify what are the segments of our portfolio where SME engagement adds the most value, to Ralph's point about understanding the trade-offs and bringing that into play. And then the final point or dimension perhaps is the market side, the market absorption rate, the ability of SMEs to engage with the way we've constructed the tender documents and not running them into bankruptcy due to delayed payment cycle, etc. And I wish we had time to discuss this, but there's also a risk here on sustainability, right? With all the new regulatory requirements that we put forth. They're all well-intended, but SMEs may actually not have the capacity or the resources to meet those requirements. And instead of running them into bankruptcy, we run them into sort of a regulatory quicksand where they may not be able to compete because of that. So something to reflect on for another panel, perhaps Luciana. But thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to the audience who have been with us. I hope this was useful. I would encourage the panelists perhaps to share any links in the chat box to any of the reference material that has been brought up. That's always helpful. And then I think I'm well out of time, 2 minutes over. Sorry, Maria, over to you for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carsten. Thank you for everything. And actually, BCtA would like to express a very heartfelt thank you to today's session moderators, Juan David Martin, and also Carsten Hansen there for their invaluable support and dedication in preparing these sessions. And recapping to today's agenda, I'd like to highlight that on the one hand, we have the opportunity to learn about innovative public-private collaboration models, plus refresh the benefits of business to government models for low-income populations, and also discuss the potential of business to government models in delivering essential services to the last mile. And on the other hand, we delve deeply into the benefits, the challenges, and the case for enhancing small and medium enterprise-based innovative uptake in public procurement processes. And in particular, we discussed inclusive public procurement principles, strategies, and also practices. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the first day of the BCtA Annual Forum 2022. We hope that today's sessions gave you something to think about and inspired you at the same time. So do join us tomorrow for equally riveting discussions on impact measurement, plus management, and effective public-private partnerships for development cooperation. Once again, I'm Maria Ramos, official host of the 12th BCtA Annual Forum, and it has been fantastic to be with you today. See you on day 2. Have a pleasant morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world right now. Goodbye and see you tomorrow. Take care.